Here we have Mike Cooper with us. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
So yesterday I was listening to the radio talk, and you were talking about how you started making music. You were a songwriter, a bluesman. Can you tell us something about how you started?
How I started playing folk music and blues in the late 50s and early 60s. So I was a solo performer, and I was a singer more than anything. I did play the guitar, but the first band I was in, I was only a singer. I didn't play guitar at all. And I had that band, it was called the Blues Committee, and that was for maybe 2-3 years. And when the band finished, I started to play solo, and I just played acoustic guitar and sang blues for a number of years, and then just playing acoustic blues up until about 1968, and then I had a record contract with Pi Records in England, and I made one blues LP. And then after that, I was ready to change direction and start writing my own songs and things. But I was still playing in folk clubs, but I had a musical idea that I wanted to mix up blues and folk music with jazz musicians, rather than using rock musicians or folk musicians. And I made 3 records in the early 70s. Which was experimenting with song forms and using jazz musicians, not rock musicians. So they were quite interesting records for me musically. And those I made 3 records in the early 70s, and they've just been re-released on vinyl, in fact. So that's nice for me, because all these years later, 40 years later, they just come out again. So in the mid-70s, I gave up playing music for a little while, and I stopped writing songs because people weren't really interested in what I was doing very much. And so I went to live in Spain for a while. And while I was there, I had some thoughts about music in general, and I became more interested in improvised music, and in sound art. And so towards the end of the 70s, maybe 1978 and 79, I went back to England. I've been living in Spain and Germany, France. I went back to England, and I joined in the London Musicians Cooperative. There were a bunch of musicians in London playing improvised music. And I got involved in the improvised music scene in London. So I did that through the late 70s and the early 80s. And then there were many people using the voice in improvised music, but I wasn't interested in doing that because I thought they were doing it very well, and I didn't want to do anything that was not as good as they were doing. So I didn't have anything to say in that direction. So I didn't use the voice for a long, long time. And then in 1986, or something like that, I came back to playing Hawaiian music. So I was playing Hawaiian music, singing in Hawaiian language as well. And I made some records for a French record label doing that. And I also played in a reggae band for a while in the mid-80s. I played rhythm guitar in a reggae band. Did a lot of different musical activity. And then I moved to Italy in 1988. And while I was here, I got more interested again in making songs. But I didn't want to do it in the traditional way that people write songs, and it's a fixed thing and you sing it the same every night. I was interested to find a way of making it more flexible so that it was kind of like improvised music. And I began to use the 2 novels from Thomas Pynchon, the American writer. He wrote a book called Gravity's Rainbow and another one called V. V was the first one, in fact, and then he wrote Gravity's Rainbow. They're both very long books. Gravity's Rainbow is over 1,000 pages long, And I chose those two books to work with because they were both, the subject matter was written around the time that I was born, which was in the Second World War, 1942, 46. They're both set around that period of history. And what I did was I used like a William Burroughs cut-up technique, the American writer William Burroughs, and Brian Gysin. They in the 60s they invented this way of making poetry or even novels by cutting up their own writing and rearranging the words. And I started to do that with these two novels of Thomas Pynchon, and I made songs from that method of working. So they actually were, in a way, they were nothing to do with me. They were completely separate from myself, and so. Also, I would improvise the music, the backing music, live when I did it. I only did these things live, so they were improvised music, and they were improvised text as well, because sometimes I could mix up two of the texts together, and that would work that way. So every performance of these pieces was different, and they still are. And you heard one the other night, and that would be completely different to when I did it another night. And I've been working with that kind of context, in that context, for the last 10 years now, yeah. And I try and record them live I try and make records live now, just live, because it's different every night, so I do that. And I also do a lot of the music that I made the other night. I have this other kind of context that I work in, which is a kind of ambient exotica music. I'm very interested in Polynesian culture and the South Seas and the oceans, and in the 1950s in America there was a style of music which there was called kind of lounge and tiki music. It's very kind of middle of the road, easy listening music, a kind of fake Polynesian music. It was kind of like Hawaiian shirts and things like this, and I was very interested in that because it's a kind of parallel culture that was going on. There was a kind of pop music, but it wasn't pop mainstream, but it wasn't avant-garde, but it was avant-garde because it was so kitsch and cheesy, as we say in English, that it was kind of avant-garde in its own way. A bit like now, there's a kind of interest in the music of James Last, who makes a kind of this easy listening music, and in Italy, although they were not Italian, they were American Italians, Santo and Johnny in the 60s. They had a kind of Hawaiian guitar thing, and they made a lot of Italian music, and they were kind of avant-garde in their way because they were so strangely, they didn't fit into the pop world, and so I was kind of interested to make a 21st century version of that kind of music, and I use that. I do that as well, and I've combined that now with the songs, so that has become the kind of backing to the songs, and but it's improvised as well, so I make it up on the spot. So that's what I'm working with now.
Okay. So as you said, the avant-garde usually don't use the song form.
Yeah.
But maybe you are looking for, we're looking for this kind of form, and so this will bringing back your vision to, I don't know, to pop. It was nearer to pop, so it's a mixture.
Yes.
Of pop and avant-garde, like a midland.
Yeah,
you were
exactly,
exploring.
Yeah, I was interested to bring, as you said, bring the two cultures together. I mean, I've just been listening to this guy mixing out here, and that's the same kind of thing but different. It's a pop avant-garde again. You know, this dub kind of music is pop avant-garde. You know, it's not mainstream at all. Yeah?
No.
You would never hear that on TV or on the radio very much. Yeah? And I was interested to do it with the song because nobody was using text in the avant-garde. They were using the voice as an instrument, but not using text at all. And I was interested to bring the text back into it because it was slowly kind of losing a kind of human element, I thought, and text is also interesting because it's words. When we hear words, we see pictures. That's the way it works. And I was interested in reanimating that kind of vision that happens when you listen to words in avant-garde music. It's very easy to sit and just listen to avant-garde music. You just hear music, and you probably don't see any pictures when you're listening to it in your head. Yeah. But when you hear words, you immediately start to see pictures. Yeah.
So words bring us to an imaginary field, maybe more human, more near to people,
yes.
Nearer to people. And can you tell us something about using the voice? How do you choose your texts? And about improvisation. Mm-hmm. So this kind of randomness that it's not so random as we think.
Yeah, that was interesting because I was making these texts up out of what I thought was a random selection, yeah. But then after a while, I realized that even when you take a piece of paper and you cut it up in the middle and you cut it up, tear it up, mix up the words, strangely they make some kind of weird sense. They start to make another kind of sense out of this nonsense, which was very interesting. And also I discovered that after a while, those texts that I made, after a while they sometimes became relevant to situations I found myself in. For instance, one of those pieces that I made, it was about ships on the water and seemed to be about people stranded somewhere. And I recorded the piece in Lisbon for an album, and it was the same week that there was that tragedy in Lampedusa when the boat sank with 200 people on, and suddenly that song was like, out of randomness, was incredibly suddenly relevant to that day we were living in, which I found really spooky, in fact. Yeah. And I've discovered that with other songs, that sometimes as songwriters or even poets and writers, you sometimes write your own future, which is very weird.
It
can be very spooky.
Yeah. What do you think about non-creative writing movement?
Well, that was another interesting thing for me, because when I was talking to some guys in Rome who have an art magazine called Nero, and they were involved in producing a record I made recently. And one of them said to me one day, he said, what do you feel about songwriting? And I said, I don't write songs anymore. I said, I think there are enough songs in the world, that's enough. And he said, yeah, you said something about that to me once before, how you were kind of interested in non-creative writing. I said, yeah. He said, do you know there is a movement of non-creative writers? And I said, no, I had no idea. He said, yeah, I'll send you an article that was written. And he sent me this incredibly long article that was written for an arts magazine, and it was kind of talking about this non-creative writing movement and giving examples. And at the end of the article, the person that put it together said, the thing you've just read is totally made up. It is taken from other people's writing, cut up and put together like a collage. It had already been written by other people. But then he took all these bits and pieces, put them together, and they made a fresh piece of writing out of other people's writing to explain something, which was very interesting that you could do this. And what I'd been doing was the same kind of thing. And also I make films as well, and video films. I had made a long 50-minute video which was made up visually from video that I made while I was traveling. And I invented this character, this person. He's called Agent Cooper. And I put this text together, this story together, to put with these visual images, all of which I took from the internet. So all the information came from the internet. So there was nothing, I invented nothing at all. So I only invented this person, and all the things he said and all the things that he did and everything, they all came from the internet, all this information. An example of it was, at one point he goes to a place in Australia called Byron Bay. And I've been to Byron Bay many times, yeah. And I always thought that Byron Bay was named after the poet Byron. But then when I looked up Byron Bay, I discovered that Byron Bay, in fact, was named after his great-grandfather, who was a sailor and went to this place. And so there was that kind of information that I put into the film, and he's kind of telling you this information. So he's telling you something that is already on the internet you could find for yourself if you knew to bother to look for Byron Bay and things like that. So he does this whole voyage and looking for this. He's looking for this person who doesn't exist in the end, and so that was another way of. I discovered this was a new way of creating dialogue and text for films. Even that you could just use all that information that is already around us. Like there's enough of it. We don't need to create any more. There's so much there. It's like we could make stuff forever with just recycling our own images and text.
And so the net gives us a new chance to take information and mix them. Maybe when we send this information to one another, it can change all this stuff and start again.
Yeah, you just recycle all the messages you send to people and just rewrite them all, and they can send them back to you as another message. Yeah. The one you sent them, they can send back to you. You'll think it's from them.
Yeah, I have this CD in my hands, this Trace, and what can you tell us about this record and your work with Chris Abrams?
Chris Abrams is a piano player, and he works in a trio which is called the Necks in Australia. He's from Australia. They all three are from Australia, and they play a kind of like kind of trance jazz music, where they play very long pieces, maybe 1 hour without stopping. And they slowly develop a piece of music over 1 hour. And anyway, I've been going to Australia for more than 20 years, every year, and to play and things. And every year I would go to Chris's house, maybe for 2 days, and we would just sit and play music for 2 days in his studio. We've been doing that for 10 years. So we have a huge archive of music that would never been released, and we're slowly.
I want to listen to it.
Yeah, we're slowly releasing, and it's very interesting because we can kind of see how we changed our music over 10 years, just the two of us, and we very, very rarely play live gigs. We just do the recording in his house.
So music is writing your story, the story of your friendship.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the story of our friendship over 10 years, yeah. And I'm slowly getting it out onto different. We've released three CDs so far.
CDs.
Yeah.
And how did you choose which?
This label is from Lebanon, by the way. This is based in Beirut. It's the El Maslak label, and it's run by Sharif Sakhnawi and Mazen Kabaj. Mazen Kabaj is a trumpet player from Lebanon, and Sharif is a guitar player. They run this label, and they run a big festival in Beirut as well, called the Irtijal Festival. And they just said to me, do you want to do something for our label? I said, yeah. They said, just send us something. And I just went through our archive of music, and I thought, oh yeah, that sounds. It's this particular pieces. They were quite poppy in a way. They were less improvised music and generic improvised and plinky plonk music, and there was a bit more kind of pop to it. One of the pieces kind of sounds like The Doors to me as well, from the 60s.
And why did you choose Trace?
The name? Okay. Yeah.
That maybe can refer to tracks, no?
It can mean quite a few things, trace, yeah, because trace in English means if you leave a trace, that means you leave a sign somewhere. Or it can mean trace, you can trace around a drawing, things like that, with 2 pieces of paper. You put one. It's called tracing paper in English. Paper you can see through, trace. And also, I did another record with Chris, and one day I was in his house, and I said, we need some titles for this, Chris. And Chris is incredibly pensive person. He thinks a lot about stuff, and he would take like ages to think of a title. You know, he would just go like, and you'd be there for like half an hour while he's thinking, and then he would come up with one word, and I went like, you really don't like long titles, do you? He said, no. He said, I think titles are really important. And I'm completely the opposite. I just think like title is just a name you give to a piece of music. It doesn't mean anything. So when we had to do this, I suddenly came out. I said, Chris, I got the perfect word for the CD. It's trace. And he went, perfect, straight away. It was like, because it was really short. So that's the only reason we used trace.
Are you going to publish anything new? Other traces?
Other traces, yeah. We've got a lot of stuff, so there'll be some more CDs soon. Yeah. The one previous we did was called Oceanic Feeling Like, which was a very. Chris went, what does that mean? And I said, I don't know. Actually, I said I found it in a magazine. It was an article about surfing, and he went, what? I said, yeah, because it's like oceanic. And it's like oceanic feeling is a term that was coined by a philosopher, and it was to do with some kind of spiritual or religious feeling. Oceanic, it was feeling like the ocean, and it's like this. And I said, but it came from a surfing magazine. It was to do with being inside a wave. When you're surfing, you go inside the wave. And this woman wrote this piece about the sound when you're inside a wave surfing is incredible. It's
like a tunnel of water.
It's a tunnel of water, and it's incredibly loud. It is so loud that it is apparently a colour. It goes green, you know, when you're inside the wave. And she said it's an oceanic feeling when you're inside the tunnel. So that was where it came from.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.